Welcome to our channel, where we share stories that inspire and touch the heart. In today's video, we'll take you on an emotional journey filled with resilience, redemption, and the transformative power of love and forgiveness. It's the story of a nurse, Giana, and a millionaire, Anthony, whose lives intertwine in the most unexpected way. What begins as a job in a cold, imposing mansion evolves into a tale of uncovering secrets, rebuilding family bonds, and finding hope in the darkest of moments. Stay with us as we dive into this heartfelt story and uncover the valuable lessons it has to offer. Giana sat quietly in her small, dimly lit apartment. The golden hues of the evening sun poured through the window, casting a gentle glow over the pile of unpaid bills on her worn-out wooden table. Only 28 years old, she carried the weight of the world on her slender shoulders. Each line of worry etched into her young face told a story of perseverance and solitude. Growing up in an orphanage had left her with no family to lean on, no safety net to catch her when life became unbearably hard. She had learned to rely solely on herself, pushing through adversity with quiet resilience. Her career as a nurse had once been her salvation. Every day, she found purpose in easing the suffering of others, the tender care she offered bringing her a semblance of peace. But her own body had betrayed her. A recent health scare forced her to leave her last job, plunging her into financial insecurity. Now, desperation gnawed at her as she scoured job listings day and night, hoping for a chance to start over. Her stomach twisted with anxiety each time she turned down the corner of a newspaper page, her fingers trembling as she dialed numbers that often went unanswered. The small apartment around her felt more like a cage with each passing day. The peeling paint on the walls and the creak of the old wooden floorboards seemed to echo her sense of despair. Outside her window, the faint hum of city life carried on without her, indifferent to her struggles. Sometimes, she wondered how long she could keep going before her spirit finally gave way under the crushing weight of loneliness and responsibility. One fateful evening, her phone rang, shattering the oppressive silence of the room. She scrambled to answer, hope and dread mingling in her chest. On the other end of the line was a woman with a voice as sharp and commanding as a blade. "I'm looking for a nurse to care for my husband, Anthony," the woman said without preamble. She introduced herself as Victoria, her tone curt and authoritative, as if she were accustomed to people obeying her without question. Giana hesitated, trying to recall if she had applied for such a position. But the prospect of steady work outweighed her doubts. Desperation left her with no choice but to accept the interview. "Yes, I'm available," she replied, her voice tinged with a mix of nervousness and relief. Victoria gave her the address and ended the call as abruptly as it had begun, leaving Giana little time to prepare. Later that evening, Giana gathered her few professional belongings, a stethoscope, a notebook, and a file of credentials, and hailed a taxi to the address Victoria had provided. As the car approached the mansion, her breath caught in her throat. The sight before her was nothing short of awe-inspiring. Towering gray stone walls rose into the sky, their surfaces weathered yet imposing. Massive columns framed the entryway, and an intricately designed iron gate loomed ahead, its wrought iron curves almost menacing in their beauty. The mansion's grandeur was undeniable, but there was something unsettling about its sheer size and silence. The place felt like a monument to wealth and power, yet its stillness carried an air of isolation. Giana shivered as the taxi pulled to a stop in front of the gate. The driver glanced at her with a mix of curiosity and concern, but said nothing. As the gates creaked open, a sound that reverberated like a groan, Giana felt her heart race with both excitement and trepidation. Victoria met her in the grand entrance hall. The room was vast, its marble floors gleaming under the glow of an enormous chandelier. Ornate furniture and priceless art adorned every corner, yet the space felt devoid of warmth. Victoria herself mirrored the room, poised, elegant, and cold. She extended a hand in greeting, her smile polished, but lacking sincerity. Her sharp eyes moved over Giana like a scalpel, dissecting her appearance and demeanor with ruthless precision. During the interview, Victoria spoke about Anthony's condition with a detached indifference that made Giana uneasy. "Doctors exaggerate," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "He doesn't need much care. You just need to follow instructions." Her tone made it clear that she saw Giana as a tool, not a person. Giana nodded, swallowing her unease. Desperation once again silenced her doubts. She needed this job more than she cared to admit. Despite the unsettling tone of Victoria's words, Giana accepted the position, hoping that her care could make a difference in Anthony's life. That hope was bolstered when she met him for the first time. Lying on a large, ornate bed, Anthony appeared as fragile as glass. His pale face bore the unmistakable signs of a long and painful battle with illness. His frame, thin to the point of gauntness, seemed almost lost in the luxurious silk bedding. Yet there was something in his eyes that struck Giana, a glimmer of warmth and humanity that refused to be extinguished. When she adjusted his position to ease his breathing, Anthony managed a faint smile. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice weak but filled with gratitude. The sincerity in his words touched Giana deeply, igniting within her a renewed sense of purpose. At that moment, she resolved to do everything in her power to care for him, no matter the challenges she might face. As she left Anthony's room that evening, the weight on her shoulders felt a little lighter. For the first time in weeks, she dared to believe that she might find meaning and stability in this new chapter of her life. Yet, as she passed through the dimly lit hallways of the mansion, shadows flickering on the walls like ghosts, a quiet voice in the back of her mind warned her that not everything in this house was as it seemed. As days turned into weeks, Giana became accustomed to the mansion's somber rhythm. The grand estate seemed alive in its stillness, the creak of floorboards and the occasional rustle of leaves outside the windows acting as its whispers. Yet the cold, oppressive atmosphere often left her uneasy, as though unseen eyes were watching her every move. Despite her apprehension, Giana poured her energy into her work, ensuring that Anthony received the best care she could provide. Her routine revolved around him, measuring his vitals, preparing his medication, and attempting to offer comfort in the brief moments when he was awake and lucid. However, troubling patterns began to emerge. Anthony's health declined far more rapidly than she had anticipated, even for someone in his condition. His coughing fits became more violent, his skin took on a pallor that was almost ghostly, and his body grew weaker by the day. It was as though something unseen was sapping the life out of him, and Giana couldn't shake the feeling that this decline was anything but natural. She scrutinized his medical records and double-checked every step of his treatment, ensuring she hadn't made a mistake. But the unease gnawed at her, refusing to abate. One day, while tidying the small medicine cabinet in Anthony's room, Giana's hands froze. Among the neatly arranged prescribed pills was a bottle she didn't recognize. Its label was blank, save for a few cryptic numbers that offered no clarity about its contents. Her heart began to race as she picked it up, turning it over in her hands. Why was this here? It wasn't part of the treatment plan provided by the doctor. A chill ran down her spine as questions flooded her mind, but she knew exactly who might have the answers. Later that evening, Giana approached Victoria with the bottle in hand. She found her in the drawing room, sipping a glass of wine as if the world beyond her mansion's gilded walls didn't exist. Victoria barely looked up when Giana entered. "Mrs. Victoria," Giana began hesitantly, holding the bottle out, "I found this among Mr. Anthony's medications. I don't believe it was prescribed. Can you tell me what it's for?" Victoria's eyes flicked toward the bottle, her expression unreadable. She set her glass down slowly, her polished demeanor never faltering. "It's nothing for you to worry about," she said, her voice smooth but edged with steel. "Just do your job, Giana." The dismissive reply left Giana speechless. Before she could protest, Victoria's sharp gaze met hers, a silent warning not to press further. Giana retreated, her unease deepening. Something was terribly wrong, and the weight of it pressed heavily on her chest. A few days later, fate provided an unexpected ally in James, the mansion's gardener. Giana had often seen him working in the grounds, his quiet and unassuming presence blending into the background of the estate's sprawling gardens. That morning, while passing through the greenhouse, she noticed him struggling to move a heavy pot. Offering her help, she struck up a conversation. What began as idle chatter about the weather and the roses soon took a more serious turn. James glanced around to ensure no one was listening before leaning closer. "I don't like to speak ill of anyone," he began in a hushed tone, "but there's something you should know about Mrs. Victoria." He hesitated, as if weighing the risk of sharing what he knew. "She's been instructing the staff to put substances in Mr. Anthony's food." Giana felt her stomach drop. "What kind of substances?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. James shook his head. "I don't know exactly. I've seen bottles and powders, but she keeps everything tightly controlled. All I know is that it's not helping him. It's making him worse. She doesn't want him to get better." The revelation hit Giana like a thunderclap. The pieces began to fall into place: the mysterious medication, Anthony's rapid decline, and Victoria's evasive behavior. Her shock quickly gave way to fear. If James was right, Anthony's life was in imminent danger. She couldn't stand by and let it happen. From that day forward, Giana became more vigilant. She quietly documented everything: the unfamiliar medications, Anthony's worsening symptoms, and any unusual behavior from Victoria. She even began saving small samples of the substances she found, determined to have them tested when the opportunity arose. Each act of defiance felt like a small victory, but the constant tension wore on her. She often found herself looking over her shoulder, her nerves stretched thin by the ever-present sense of danger. One afternoon, while Giana sat by Anthony's bedside, he stirred and opened his eyes. His gaze, though weak, held a clarity that startled her. "Giana," he rasped, his voice barely audible, "I need you to do something for me." She leaned closer, her heart pounding. "What is it, Mr. Anthony?" "Pretend to be my daughter," he whispered, his words slow and deliberate. "Just for one day." The request left her stunned. She searched his face for an explanation, but his expression remained earnest. "Why?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. "Because." He paused, gathering what little strength he had. "There are things I need to set right, and I don't have much time." Giana's mind raced. The weight of his words was almost too much to bear. Why would he ask this of her? What was he trying to accomplish? Though confusion and hesitation swirled within her, she couldn't bring herself to refuse him. There was a desperation in his voice, a silent plea that she couldn't ignore. "I'll do it," she said at last, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Anthony closed his eyes, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Thank you," he whispered. "You don't know how much this means to me." As she sat there, holding his frail hand in hers, Giana felt the enormity of what she had agreed to sink in. She had no idea what lay ahead or how this decision would change her life. All she knew was that she had made a promise, and she intended to keep it. The mansion's oppressive silence seemed to close in around her, the walls themselves bearing witness to secrets that were slowly unraveling. The following day, Anthony called his lawyer to the mansion. The morning sun streamed through the tall, arched windows of the study, illuminating the polished mahogany desk and casting long shadows across the room. The air was tense, almost suffocating, as if the very walls of the grand house could sense the impending confrontation. Giana stood to the side, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, unsure of her place in the unfolding drama. Anthony sat in his wheelchair near the desk, his frail frame swathed in a heavy blanket, yet his piercing green eyes burned with determination. The lawyer, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and a calm, measured demeanor, quietly prepared the necessary documents. The silence was broken by the sound of hurried, angry footsteps approaching. The study door swung open with a force that made Giana flinch. Victoria stormed in, her silk robe billowing behind her like the cape of a warrior, preparing for battle. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice sharp and filled with venom. Her gaze swept the room, landing on the lawyer first, then Giana, before finally settling on Anthony. The fury in her eyes was unmistakable. Anthony, though visibly weakened by his illness, straightened in his chair, his face etched with resolve. "I want to amend my will," he said hoarsely, his voice rough but steady. Victoria's eyes narrowed into slits. She stepped closer, her heels clicking ominously against the marble floor. "What are you talking about?" she hissed, her words dripping with incredulity and contempt. "You're giving everything to this girl? She's not even your daughter." Anthony's fingers tightened on the armrests of his chair as if drawing strength from the gesture. "You're wrong," he said firmly. His voice, though strained, carried an undeniable authority. "Giana is my daughter. I've known for some time now." The declaration hung in the air like a thunderclap. For a brief moment, the room fell utterly silent, the only sound the faint rustle of papers as the lawyer adjusted his files. Giana stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded against her ribcage, each beat echoing in her ears. Tears welled in her eyes, threatening to spill over as she tried to process the enormity of Anthony's words. All her life, she had been alone, drifting through a sea of uncertainty. Now, in the most unexpected way, she had found a family, a father who had not only acknowledged her but had also fought for her. But Victoria was far from moved. The silence shattered as she erupted in fury, her voice rising to a shrill crescendo. "You're insane," she screamed, her face contorted with rage. "This girl is manipulating you, and you're falling for it. She's just another one of those opportunists looking to bleed you dry." "I've made my decision," Anthony said, his voice unwavering despite her outburst. "You've controlled me long enough." Victoria's face turned crimson, and for a moment, she seemed on the verge of losing all composure. "Controlled you?" She spat, her voice shaking with indignation. "I've stood by you through everything, through your illness, through your weakness, and this is how you repay me? By throwing away everything we've built for some stranger?" "She's not a stranger," Anthony retorted, his tone cutting through her tirade like a blade. "She's my daughter. And you," he paused, his voice trembling not with fear but with years of suppressed frustration, "you have done nothing but poison this house with your greed and deceit." Victoria's hands clenched into fists at her sides, her nails digging into her palms as she glared at him. Her breath came in short, furious bursts, and for a moment, Giana feared she might lash out physically. Instead, Victoria turned on her heel and stormed out of the room, slamming the door so hard behind her that the sound reverberated through the mansion. The air in the study seemed to lighten the moment she left, as if her departure had lifted an oppressive weight. The lawyer quietly resumed his work, his pen scratching softly against the paper. But for Giana, the sense of relief was fleeting. She looked at Anthony, her tears now flowing freely. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Am I really your daughter?" Anthony turned his gaze to her, his green eyes softening. "Yes," he said simply, his voice laden with both sorrow and love. "I only found out recently. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I didn't know how." Giana's knees felt weak, and she sank into a nearby chair. 1,000 emotions swirled within her, joy, disbelief, anger, and fear. Her entire world had shifted in the span of a few minutes, and she didn't know how to steady herself. She thought of all the years she had spent yearning for a family, for someone who would claim her as their own. Now, that longing had been fulfilled, but it came with a heavy burden. "Why now?" she whispered. why did you wait? Anthony's face was etched with regret. Because I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid of what it would mean for you, for us. But I can't let that fear dictate my actions anymore. You deserve the truth, and you deserve everything I have to give. Giana wiped her tears, her heart aching with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. She wanted to embrace him, to let him know how much his words meant to her, but the weight of the moment held her back. Instead, she simply nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you. The lawyer, sensing the gravity of the situation, quietly excused himself to give them privacy. The room fell into a contemplative silence, broken only by the distant sound of Victoria's angry footsteps echoing somewhere in the mansion. Giana glanced toward the closed door, her mind heavy with the realization that her newfound family came with its own share of pain and strife. For Anthony, the decision had been made, and the weight of it seemed to settle across his frail shoulders. But there was also a sense of peace in his expression, as though he had finally taken control of his life after years of being overshadowed by Victoria's dominance. As the afternoon light began to fade, casting long shadows across the room, Giana reached out and took Anthony's hand in hers. It was a small gesture, but it carried with it an unspoken promise that no matter what lay ahead, they would face it together. In the months that followed, Anthony slowly regained his strength, thanks to Giana's unwavering care and the removal of Victoria's harmful influence. Each day marked a small victory, a step away from the shadow of illness and deceit that had plagued the mansion. Anthony's once pale complexion began to regain a healthy glow, and his frail frame grew sturdier as he committed to his recovery. Giana was by his side every step of the way, her nurturing presence a constant source of reassurance. She ensured he adhered to his new treatment plan, prepared nutritious meals, and encouraged him to engage in light exercises, always mindful of his limitations. The mansion, once a cold and oppressive place, seemed to breathe easier without Victoria's domineering presence. The air felt lighter, the silence more peaceful rather than foreboding. Even the staff, who had grown accustomed to walking on eggshells around Victoria, seemed more at ease. James, the gardener, often stopped by to check on Anthony, bringing fresh flowers from the garden to brighten the rooms. The household began to feel like a home again, not just a monument to wealth and power. However, the peace was not without its battles. The legal disputes over Anthony's will dragged on for months, with Victoria contesting every decision. She appeared in court with the same air of entitlement she had wielded in the mansion, her arguments steeped in bitterness and desperation. But the evidence against her was overwhelming. Witnesses testified to her manipulative behavior, and Giana's meticulous documentation of the mysterious medications sealed Victoria's fate. The court's decision was clear and final. Victoria's claims were dismissed, leaving her with nothing but the consequences of her actions. Stripped of her power and influence, she retreated from public life. Rumors swirled about her whereabouts. Some said she had moved to a modest apartment in a distant city. Others claimed she lived in isolation, nursing her grievances. Whatever the truth, Victoria's ambitions were reduced to ashes, her legacy overshadowed by her greed. Meanwhile, Anthony and Giana began the process of rebuilding their relationship. It was not without its challenges. Decades of separation could not be undone overnight. Yet, each shared story, each heartfelt conversation, brought them closer together. They spoke of the past, their regrets, and their hopes for the future. Giana shared stories of her childhood in the orphanage, her struggles, and her dreams. Anthony listened with a mix of sorrow and admiration, marveling at the strength his daughter had shown in the face of adversity. Determined to make up for lost time, Anthony invited Giana to join his pharmaceutical company. "You have a gift," he told her one evening as they sat by the fireplace, the flames casting a warm glow across the room. "Your compassion, your understanding of what people truly need, it's something this company has been missing. Together, we can make a real difference." Giana hesitated at first, unsure if she could navigate the corporate world. But Anthony's unwavering faith in her abilities gave her the courage to accept. In her new role, Giana brought a fresh perspective to the company. Drawing on her experiences as a nurse, she spearheaded initiatives to make life-saving medications more affordable and accessible. She worked tirelessly to establish partnerships with nonprofit organizations, ensuring that even the most vulnerable populations could receive the care they needed. The changes Giana and Anthony implemented had a profound impact, not just on the company, but on the lives of countless people. Testimonials from patients began pouring in, stories of families saved from financial ruin and lives transformed by the availability of affordable treatment. For the first time, Anthony felt that his wealth and influence were being used for a purpose far greater than himself. 1 year later, on a warm summer afternoon, Anthony and Giana returned to the beach where they had first celebrated their newfound bond. The salty breeze carried with it the sound of laughter and conversation, as friends, colleagues, and staff gathered to join them. It was a day of joy and reflection, a celebration of life and second chances. James was there, along with several members of the household staff who had become like family to Giana. Even the lawyer, who had played a pivotal role in securing justice, was invited to share in the festivities. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Anthony turned to Giana. The soft light reflected in his eyes, now filled with warmth and contentment. "You've given me more than a second chance at life," he said, his voice steady with emotion. "You've given me a reason to keep living." Giana smiled, her heart full to the brim. The journey that had brought her here had been one of pain, perseverance, and ultimate redemption. She thought back to the lonely nights in her small apartment, the fear and uncertainty that had once consumed her. Those days felt like a distant memory, replaced by a profound sense of belonging and purpose. "For the first time in my life, I feel complete," she replied, her voice soft but resolute. She looked out at the waves, their rhythmic whispering a soothing backdrop to her thoughts. In Anthony, she had found not just a father, but a kindred spirit, a man who understood the value of hope and the power of starting anew. As the evening deepened, the gathering moved to a large bonfire on the beach. Laughter rang out as stories were shared, each person contributing a piece to the tapestry of this remarkable journey. Anthony, seated comfortably by the fire, watched Giana interact with their guests, her laughter ringing out like music. Pride swelled in his chest as he realized how far they had both come. When the fire burned low and the stars shone brightly overhead, Anthony and Giana sat side by side, their gazes fixed on the horizon. The waves lapped gently at the shore, as if carrying away the remnants of their past sorrows. Their bond, forged through trials and strengthened by forgiveness, stood as a testament to the transformative power of family and resilience. In the quiet of that moment, Giana reflected on the lessons she had learned. Life, she realized, was not about the absence of hardship, but about the strength to overcome it. Love and forgiveness had given her the courage to rebuild, to create something beautiful from the ashes of her pain. And in doing so, she had discovered the light that had always been within her, waiting to shine. As the waves continued their eternal dance against the shore, Giana and Anthony sat quietly, letting the calmness of the moment wash over them. The fire had died down, but its warmth lingered, much like the memories of the journey they had shared. Giana turned to Anthony, her voice gentle but purposeful. "Everything we've been through," she said, "it's shown me that life doesn't give us what we expect, but sometimes, it gives us exactly what we need. Even in our hardest moments, there's a chance to find something beautiful if we're brave enough to hold on." Anthony smiled, his weathered face illuminated by the starlight. "You've taught me that it's never too late to change," he replied. "Never too late to seek forgiveness, to make things right, or to build something meaningful. For so long, I let fear and regret hold me back. But now, with you by my side, I know the future is worth fighting for." Their bond, unshakable and profound, was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Both had faced darkness, Giana, through years of loneliness and uncertainty, and Anthony, through the betrayal and manipulation that had nearly cost him everything. Yet together, they had found a light that not only illuminated their path, but inspired those around them. Thank you for joining us on this journey of love, forgiveness, and second chances. Giana and Anthony's story reminds us that even in life's most challenging times, hope can shine through, and the bonds we build can heal wounds we thought were permanent. If this story touched your heart or made you think differently about life, we'd love for you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire and uplift. Together, let's spread the message that no matter how dark the night, there's always light waiting to be found. See you in the next video.